A faint thrumming pulse of excitement coursed beneath my crimson gown as I entered the grand lobby of the Liberty Crown. Guests shimmered everywhere, a sea of diamonds and silks. My family swept past a colorful blur of tuxedos. Their sharp laughter echoed off the polished marble as they greeted acquaintances. They did not see me. Perhaps they did, but chose to pretend my presence simply wasn't registered. The forgotten daughter, the family disappointment. This very night, everything would change. Naturally, they remained oblivious. I moved forward, my heels tapping rhythmically on the floor. Before I could reach the ballroom entrance, a hand seized my arm. "Grace, what are you doing here?" Turning, I faced my brother Mason, his grip instantly tightening. His eyes assessed my simple dress, my jewelry, which was intentionally understated. A sneer formed on his lip. "You have no business here," he hissed low. "You're embarrassing us. Go home immediately before anyone else notices." I yanked my arm away, meeting his aggressive stare. "I received an invitation same as you." "Invited?" Mason barked a harsh laugh. "Right. Did you manage to scrounge up enough cash for a ticket? Perhaps you're here to leech off Mom and Dad as usual." My cheeks burned, yet I kept my voice perfectly level. "Their money holds no interest for me, nor does yours. Grace." My mother's voice sliced through the lobby's cheerful bustle. She approached, martini in hand. She scrutinized me from head to toe. Her polite smile vanished. "Dear God, what on earth are you wearing? I clearly told you not to attend." I decided otherwise. My chin lifted. I refused to let her notice how deeply her easy dismissal stung. My father appeared beside her, his brow furrowed. "Grace, this evening is strictly for donors and established patrons. Nobody here wants to see you begging for scraps. It looks pathetic." A scorching, bright wave of anger flashed through me. Years of being ignored, perpetually shoved aside, treated like an object of pity or family shame, I had endured enough. I would not cower in the background any longer. I opened my mouth to reply, but the front doors glided open instead. My driver Thomas stepped through. He crossed the lobby with purpose and bowed his head toward me. "Miss Dalton, your car is ready. Shall I arrange for your bags to be brought up to the penthouse suite?" Silence descended abruptly. My mother's drink slipped from her fingers, shattering on the marble. Her what?" my father stammered out. Thomas looked calmly from one family member to the next, his expression utterly blank. "Miss Dalton's penthouse suite." He turned back to me. "Will your family be joining you upstairs at a later time?" My smile returned slow and fierce. "No, Thomas, I doubt they will. Thank you for asking." A wave of whispers rippled through the stunned lobby as I walked away, leaving my paralyzed parents and furious brother behind. I heard the shocked repetition of penthouse and Dalton in murmured tones. I did not look back. The elevator climbed to the top floor, the numbers on the panel glowing like guiding beacons. When the doors parted, I stepped into my own private domain. Floor-to-ceiling windows showcased the vast, glittering city skyline. Sleek, modern furniture, thick plush rugs, and a fireplace already crackling invitingly. A bottle of vintage champagne rested coolly in a silver bucket, 2 crystal flutes waiting beside it. All these carefully chosen luxuries, all the wealth I had meticulously hidden away for years, it had all been saved for this very moment. I ran my hand across the counter's edge, letting the expensive cold ground me. This wealth was my armor, my undeniable power. Anonymity had served its purpose, allowing me to build my fortune unseen. That necessary silence ended tonight. A soft knock came at the door. Thomas entered, carrying my garment bags. "Everything is prepared. The stylist will arrive shortly," he mentioned. His eyes crinkled at the corners. "It promises to be quite the spectacular entrance." I turned toward the window again, adrenaline thrumming steadily through my veins. Within the hour, I would descend that grand staircase in a bespoke gown draped in the finest jewels. The days of fading into the background were over. No longer would I accept their pity or scorn. They would finally see me for who I truly was. My reflection smirked back from the glass. This disappointment was ready to show her family exactly what she was truly capable of achieving. Entering the ballroom felt like stepping onto a stage. The orchestra's vibrant music enveloped me. Crystal chandeliers cast a radiant, warm glow illuminating the densely packed, elegantly dressed crowd. Waiters circulated efficiently with trays of champagne and hors d'oeuvres. Their crisp uniforms provided a sharp visual contrast to the guests' glittering attire. I scanned the room, my focus immediately settling on several familiar faces: wealthy political donors, influential power brokers, the absolute crème de la crème of this insular society. They were the very same people who had dismissed me for years, who had gossiped behind their hands about the Dalton family's wayward, forgotten daughter. They had no clue whatsoever. My stride carried me toward the room's center. The silk of my dress rustled faintly with each step. Curious, assessing eyes tracked my movement. I sensed their collective gaze as a physical touch, yet I kept my head high, my shoulders perfectly relaxed. Retreating beneath their scrutiny was no longer an option. Not tonight. As I passed a cluster of women, their eager conversation abruptly ceased. I caught fragments of their strained whispers. "Is that really Grace Dalton? I thought she wasn't invited. What on earth is she doing here?" Their sharp words pricked my skin, but they failed to penetrate my armor. I had spent years meticulously constructing my empire in the shadows, patiently biding my time until this exact moment to step into the light. The wait was finally over. My eyes found my family near the edge of the dance floor. They huddled close together, their faces a mixture of outright shock and cold outrage. My mother clung tightly to my father's arm. Her face was noticeably pale. Mason's jaw was visibly clenched as he watched my progress, his eyes hard and calculating. I met their stares unflinchingly. A faint, controlled smile touched my lips. They were entirely unprepared for what was coming next. I turned away, my gaze sweeping the room again. A brilliant flash of red caught my attention. I located Ava Moretti. She stood near the rear of the ballroom, her dark hair pulled back in a severely elegant twist. Our eyes connected, and she inclined her head slightly, a discreet gesture of acknowledgement and deep respect. Ava knew my long-held secret. She was one of the very few individuals I had trusted implicitly as I built Dalton Enterprises from scratch. She grasped the essential need for discretion, the immense power inherent in keeping things perfectly concealed until the timing was flawless. I moved toward her completely, disregarding the renewed murmurs that followed me. Ava greeted me with a genuine warm smile. Her eyes sparkled with approval. "You certainly understand how to make a definitive entrance," she murmured softly. I laughed, a quiet, controlled sound. "Go big or go home, isn't that the old adage?" "Indeed it is," Ava replied. Her gaze flickered briefly over my shoulder. "Your family appears less than pleased, I observe. They'll manage." A shrug accompanied my words. I accepted champagne from a passing tray. The bubbles danced crisply on my tongue, cool and clean. Perhaps they won't manage. It remains immaterial either way. Ava studied my face for a moment. Her professional expression softened with a personal touch. "I'm genuinely proud of you, Grace. You've achieved so much." Emotion thickened in my throat. I swallowed hard against it. Ava's steadfast support meant far more than she could possibly know. When the entire world had turned its back on me, she had been there instantly, offering necessary guidance and unwavering encouragement. "Thank you," I said quietly, "truly for absolutely everything." She squeezed my hand. Her touch felt warm and immediately reassuring. "You earned every bit of this. Never allow yourself to forget that fact." I nodded successfully, blinking back the sudden sting of uninvited tears. I absolutely would not allow them to fall here. Not now. The orchestra began a new composition, a lively, swirling waltz that quickly filled the massive ballroom. Couples moved onto the dance floor, twirling and spinning in a vibrant kaleidoscope of colors. I watched them briefly, my mind momentarily lost in reflection. How many nights had I dreamt of this precise moment, a moment of finally standing tall, unafraid within the very world that had so easily rejected me. It had been a long, arduous journey, characterized by relentless late nights and countless personal sacrifices. But I succeeded. I had proven every single one of them wrong. A hand touching my elbow startled me out of my reverie. I spun around to find Thomas standing beside me, his expression unusually serious. "Miss Dalton, there is something I must show you." His grave tone immediately made my stomach clench tight. I followed him out of the ballroom, my heart pounding audibly in my chest. He led me toward a secluded alcove safely away from any prying eyes or curious ears. "What is it?" I asked, keeping my voice hushed. Thomas handed me a tablet. The screen glowed softly in the dim light. "It has been released across all news channels." Looking down, my breath instantly hitched. There, splashed dramatically across the major headlines, was my name, my face, my deepest secret publicly exposed. "Billionaire heiress Grace Dalton revealed," the article screamed. "Dalton Enterprises CEO shocks family at Christmas Gala." The ground seemed to tilt violently beneath my feet. This was not the plan, not yet, certainly not in this chaotic fashion. I quickly scrolled through the article, my eyes desperately skimming the details. They possessed every piece of information: my exact net worth, my company's substantial holdings, the private penthouse suite details. Somehow the truth I had worked so tirelessly to conceal had been discovered and broadcast. Anger and pure fear waged an instant, fierce battle for dominance inside me. Who had leaked this highly confidential information? Who could possibly have betrayed me? I looked up at Thomas, my eyes hardening instantly. "Find out who released this. I need a name immediately." He nodded once, his jaw tight with resolve. "Right away, Miss Dalton." Handing the tablet back, my mind raced wildly. I needed to control this narrative quickly, seizing absolute control before the story spun entirely beyond my grasp. First, however, I had to confront my family. Squaring my shoulders, I drew a deep, stabilizing breath. I had labored too hard, come too immense a distance to permit anyone to tear me down now, not even the people who shared my DNA. I strode back into the ballroom, my head held deliberately high. The whispers intensified as I moved, people brazenly craning their necks for a better look. I ignored them all. My focus remained laser-sharp. My family stood exactly where I had left them, their faces a chaotic mix of shock and utter fury. I approached them slowly, my heart hammered a frantic rhythm. "We need a conversation," I stated, my voice completely calm and even. My father's eyes flashed with fresh anger. "I think you owe us quite a few explanations." "Not here." I glanced pointedly around the room, acutely aware of the countless eyes watching our exchange. "In a private location." I turned instantly on my heel, not waiting for their expected response. I knew they would follow. They had utterly no choice left. Walking away, I met Ava's gaze across the room one last time. She offered a single silent nod of support. I drew profound strength from that quiet gesture, from the simple knowledge that I was definitely not alone anymore. I had spent years existing in the shadows, constructing my empire, brick by brick, piece by painstaking piece. Now was the time to fully step into the blinding light, to claim my rightful position in this world. Heaven help anyone foolish enough to attempt standing in my way. My measured steps carried me across the vast ballroom floor. The orchestra's melody swelled gently around me. This soft music starkly contrasted with the potent tension thrumming beneath my skin. Guests continued to mill about. Their laughter and chatter dissolved into a background hum that filled the space. Nobody looked at me directly. Nobody seemed to register my presence. Anonymity cloaked me like a ghost, making me feel insubstantial. A portion of me welcomed this feeling of being unseen, enjoying the ability to navigate the crowd unnoticed. Another part, the part that had spent years meticulously building an empire in complete obscurity, longed to finally step fully into the light. I headed toward the bar, my gaze slowly sweeping the room. Everywhere I looked, the hallmarks of immense wealth and entrenched power were evident: designer gowns, blinding jewelry, the most expensive champagne money could acquire. This was a world from which I had been completely excluded, a world that had once judged me thoroughly unworthy. Yet now I moved through it with the confidence of belonging. I absolutely did belong. My place here had been hard-earned, paid for, with exhaustive labor and profound personal sacrifice. Reaching the bar, I caught my own reflection in the mirror behind the rows of liquor bottles. I barely recognized the woman staring back at me. She appeared poised and supremely confident, her chin lifted high, her eyes radiating clarity. She looked precisely like someone capable of commanding any room with just a single glance. I ordered a simple drink. The words left my lips with a surprising, unfamiliar ease. The bartender nodded his gaze, briefly flickered over me before he began preparing the cocktail. Watching him work, my mind drifted momentarily toward the past. I remembered the very first gala I had ever attended years prior. I was young, desperately naive, my heart overflowing with tentative hopes and unformed dreams. I had yearned so intensely to belong, to be accepted by the glittering crowd surrounding me. But my family swiftly made it devastatingly clear I would never be one of them. They ignored me completely, dismissing me like a minor inconvenience. I spent that entire evening hovering near the crowd's edges, my cheeks hot with shame, my eyes stinging with tears that were instantly suppressed. I swore that night I would never let them make me feel that way again. A solemn vow was made to build a new life, a life entirely and completely my own. I accomplished it. I built Dalton Enterprises from the absolute ground up, pouring every ounce of my effort into the fledgling company. I worked harder than anyone, pushing past the brink of exhaustion. The effort paid off. I possessed the control now. The power was mine. My family had absolutely no idea. The bartender slid my drink across the counter. I accepted it with a quiet thank you. Turning back to the room, I let my gaze sweep over the crowd once more. That was the moment I saw them. My family clustered near the edge of the dance floor. They were whispering urgently, their expressions tight and visibly strained. I watched my mother's eyes dart frantically around the room, desperately searching for someone, searching for me. A flicker of satisfaction warmed me at the sight of their obvious discomfort. They were oblivious to the impending storm, oblivious that their meticulously constructed world was about to shatter around them. I sipped my drink. The alcohol spread a slow, welcomed warmth through my veins. It centered me instantly, grounding me in the present moment. I understood I could not avoid them indefinitely. Eventually, they would corner me, demanding answers, demanding explanations for the spectacle. For the time being, I remained content to watch them squirm. My gaze drifted away from my family, taking in the rest of the room. I saw Ava standing near the back wall, her posture straight and commanding. Our eyes met briefly. She offered a subtle, reassuring nod. It was a small gesture, yet it meant everything to me. Ava was one of the few who had believed in my potential from the very beginning. She recognized a spark within me that refused to be extinguished. She had guided me through the ruthless world of business with unwavering purpose. I owed her more than I could ever repay. Tonight, however, I would begin trying. I finished the drink and set the empty glass down on a nearby table. I straightened my shoulders, taking a deep breath for composure. It was time for the next step. I made my way toward the stage at the room's front. My steps felt purposeful, completely assured. The crowd parted instantly before me like water. Murmurs of curiosity rippled through the air. My name was whispered. Heads turned in my direction. I kept my gaze fixed straight ahead, my chin lifted, my back ramrod straight. Cowering before them was no longer possible. Reaching the stage, I felt Thomas's hand gently touch my arm. I turned to him. His expression remained serious. "Are you entirely certain about this, Miss Dalton?" he asked, his voice barely audible. I met his gaze steadily. "I have never been more certain about anything in my life." He nodded, stepping back to allow me passage. I climbed the steps to the stage. My heart hammered against my ribs. The orchestra abruptly fell silent. The room became completely still. I walked to the microphone stand at the center of the stage. My hands held the stand with a slight stabilizing tremor. I looked out over the sea of faces. Confusion and intense curiosity marked every single expression. I inhaled deeply, exhaling slowly. Then I began to speak. "Good evening, everyone. For those of you who do not recognize me, my name is Grace Dalton." A palpable wave of shock swept through the large crowd at my words. I heard sharp gasps. Eyes widened in absolute disbelief. I understand many of you are surprised to see me here tonight. After all, I am hardly a familiar face in these specific circles. I paused, letting the profound weight of my words settle. My family stood frozen at the crowd's edge, their faces pale and utterly stricken. Yet the truth is, I have been here all along. I was watching, I was waiting. I was building an empire none of you even suspected existed. A thrill of deep satisfaction ran through me at the stunned silence that instantly greeted my statement. I commanded their attention now. Every single eye in the room was fixed directly on me. You see, while you were all preoccupied dismissing me, thoroughly underestimating me, I was working. I was learning. I was growing. Now I stand before you as the CEO of Dalton Enterprises, a company that has quietly become one of the most powerful and influential players in the industry. I heard new murmurs of disbelief. I saw heads shaking in outright denial. I pressed onward, my voice strengthening with every syllable. Many of you believe you know me well. You think you have me entirely figured out. The truth, however, is that you never truly saw me at all. My gaze swept over the crowd, encompassing the sea of shocked faces. Tonight, that narrative ends. Tonight, I step fully out of the shadows and into the light. Tonight, I claim my rightful place among you, not as the forgotten daughter, but as a force that must be reckoned with. A surge of genuine pride swelled within me at the delivery of those words, at the absolute truth that rang through my statement. I had fought for this precise moment. I had endured immense sacrifice for it. Now it had finally arrived. So allow me to properly reintroduce myself. My name is Grace Dalton. I am not going anywhere. Thank you. With that, I stepped back from the microphone, my head held high. The room instantly erupted into chaos. Voices rose in a loud, confused cacophony of shock and disbelief. I barely registered the noise. All I felt was the intense thrill of victory, the massive rush of adrenaline that came with finally claiming my undisputed place in the world. I had returned. This time, ignoring me was impossible. They would all finally see my true identity. And I was just beginning. Leaving the platform, I maintained my steady pace. No one applauded. An unnerving silence hung heavy. The ballroom felt abruptly stalled, as if every guest had inhaled deeply and collectively forgotten to exhale. I did not break my stride. My path took me through the center aisle until the donors and dancing couples receded behind me. My mother reached me first. Grace. Her hand hesitated near my arm, then she quickly dropped it. What precisely was that spectacle that, I informed her, was simply the truth? Her breath hitched. You blindsided your own family. You chose to ignore me for years, I countered directly. Being blindsided by someone you actively chose not to see is impossible. My father stood a few steps behind her. He remained silent, but his jaw visibly tightened, in the familiar way that always signaled a rapid decision between arguing or retreating. This affects more than just your personal feelings, my mother insisted. People are very familiar with our name. They speak. They jump to assumptions. They have always spoken, I corrected her. They just never bothered speaking about me. Her expression fractured momentarily, not enough to elicit any change, but enough to show she was unprepared for this newly assertive version of her daughter. My father finally stepped forward. You should have approached us earlier. We could have assisted you in navigating this. I navigated it perfectly, I replied, without any assistance from you. A heavy silence stretched tautly between us. Mason stood several feet back, hands shoved deep into his pockets, his shoulders rigid. He looked precisely like someone waiting for specific instructions, just as he always had. I looked directly at him. Do you have anything you wish to say? He shifted his weight nervously. I honestly don't understand what is happening anymore. That makes two of us, I stated. The difference is I had no choice but to figure things out entirely alone. You, on the other hand, always had them. He looked away instantly. I moved around them smoothly, neither pushing nor rushing the interaction, simply moving. They followed for only a few steps, then paused when they realized I offered no opening for debate. Reaching the room's edge, I heard conversations resume. They were not normal exchanges, but rather curious whispers, half-formed questions, guests trying to determine whether they should now pretend they always knew exactly who I was. I engaged with none of them. Ava materialized near the side doors. Her posture remained straight, her expression reassuringly steady. "You handled yourself expertly," she commented quietly. "I delivered what needed to be said." "It landed with force," she confirmed. I exhaled once. It was not genuine relief, merely the physical release of maintaining absolute composure for too long. A server passed offering a tray. I waved him away. Nothing must cloud my mind tonight. Ava studied my face. "Do you require a private moment?" "No," I replied instantly. "I require a perfectly clear path forward." She nodded and began walking beside me toward the exit corridor, away from the intense ballroom noise. The hallway was dimmer, quieter, offering sufficient space to collect my thoughts. I stopped halfway down the hall. "They won't let this go easily." "They cannot undo it," Ava observed simply. "That is precisely the part they will struggle to accept." "Let them struggle." I leaned back against the wall, not seeking rest, but simply setting my feet firmly, feeling the solidity beneath me without being watched. For so many years, I reflected, I foolishly assumed that once I demonstrated what I had built, something fundamental would change. Not because I required their approval, but because I truly believed the truth carried inherent weight. "It does carry weight," Ava corrected, "just not instantly achieved." I nodded once. "I know that now." A group of guests walked past, slowing noticeably upon recognizing me. I offered no acknowledgement. Eventually, they continued on their way. Ava waited patiently, never rushing my process. "They will definitely ask for more time," I predicted. "More lengthy explanations, more access to my world." "They are free to ask," she replied calmly. "You owe them nothing beyond whatever you specifically choose to offer." I pushed off the wall. Exactly my point. We began walking back toward the ballroom entrance. I did not step inside the room. Instead, I stood beside the doorway close enough to hear the orchestra restarting a new song. My family was clustered near a specific table, huddled tightly, speaking in hushed voices. Every few seconds, one of them glanced nervously toward the door. Ava followed my gaze. "They appear deeply shaken." "They absolutely should be. What is your next concrete plan?" "Refusing to clean up their emotional mess." She gave a small, approving nod. "Excellent." My mother spotted me immediately. Her expression tightened, then softened slightly, before twisting into something thoroughly uncertain. My father straightened his stance, bracing himself as he always did when public responsibility was unavoidable. Mason, however, just looked utterly lost. I did not move toward them. I simply waited. They approached slowly, hesitantly, as if unsure exactly how close they were permitted to get. My mother spoke first. "Can we talk about this? Perhaps in private?" "No," I replied. "If you had anything genuine to say, you would have said it years ago." My father drew a sharp breath. "Grace, we admit we were wrong." "I am aware of that." "We truly want to do better for you." "That improvement must happen without expecting anything whatsoever in return from me." They exchanged a quick, loaded look, a blend of fear instantly mixed with profound realization. It was the first truly honest emotion I had witnessed from them in decades. I did not prolong the exchange. I stepped back from the doorway, leaving them suspended exactly where they stood. Ava instantly fell in step beside me as I walked toward the main hotel exit. The cold night air met me quickly, clean and sharp. I continued walking, maintaining my pace. No dramatic smile crossed my face. No triumphant shouted speech was needed. No overwhelming rush of glory overcame me. Just a steady, perfectly even breath. I had delivered my message. They had received it completely. That was entirely enough. I reached the waiting car. Ava opened the door for me. "Ready to go?" she asked. "Yes," I confirmed. And for the first time, I utterly meant it. I stood on the balcony for far longer than initially intended. The intense noise of the gala had faded into something distant, almost unrecognizable. This silence granted me the necessary quiet to confront the stored memories, not because they were pleasant, but because I needed them utterly intact. They remain the only honest record of precisely how everything began. The night I proudly announced my scholarship acceptance still surfaces with sharp, painful clarity. I walked into the kitchen, clutching the acceptance letter tightly in both hands. Northwestern, a full academic award. The achievement felt entirely unreal, earned through merit, not merely gifted. My mother was slicing vegetables for dinner, the knife moving with steady, practiced strokes. I waited patiently until the final slice was completed before speaking. "I got into Northwestern," I announced. "All 4 years of tuition are covered." She did not turn around. "That specific school is too far away. You simply will not manage alone out there." "I absolutely can. I desperately want this." Her hand paused for a split second, just long enough for a fragile hope to form. Then she quickly rinsed the cutting board and dismissed me. "College is incredibly expensive. Scholarships often fall through grace. Do not make future plans you clearly cannot keep." She instantly assumed I had exaggerated the letter's significance. Her assumption was that I was the kind of person who misunderstood official paperwork. That single assumption spoke volumes more than her actual words. My father entered the kitchen a few minutes later. I handed him the official letter. He scanned the document without actively reading, just enough to confirm he had seen it. "Your brother requires the car tomorrow. Do not even think about taking the keys." That was the absolute extent of his acknowledgement. I knew I should have expected this reaction. Yet I still desperately craved something small, a gesture of pride, a word of simple encouragement, any sign they believed I was capable of managing my own life. It never came. The next painful memory arrived with greater force. The night they presented me with the inheritance papers. We were seated in the formal dining room. The official folder was placed squarely in the center of the table, as if it contained a generous gift. No ceremony preceded it. No conversation led up to the event. My father abruptly pushed the folder toward me. "Sign this immediately. We are officially restructuring family assets. It is simply better for everyone involved." I quickly read the first page. My name. My complete removal from the family will. A clean, legal severance. "If you truly wish to focus entirely on your schoolwork," he justified, "this will remove considerable financial pressure from you." They were not removing pressure. They were successfully removing my lineage. I was the simplest financial liability to eliminate completely. My mother quickly interjected, "Your brother will handle all matters once we are gone. This method is far cleaner." Cleaner. That devastating word pursued me for years. I signed the documents because the only alternative was remaining emotionally tethered to people who viewed me only as a perpetual inconvenience. Signing that day was the very first major decision I made entirely and solely for myself. I moved out that same night. Rain fell steadily. Not a major storm, certainly not a dramatic cinematic downpour, just a steady cold rain that completely soaked through my inadequate jacket before I reached the end of the long driveway. I dragged my heavy suitcase behind me. The wheels constantly snagged on the uneven pavement. No one followed my exit. No one called my name. They merely watched from the front doorway just long enough to ensure I was definitively leaving. Then they firmly shut the door. The apartment I secured the following day was tiny. I could practically touch opposite walls if I fully stretched out my arms. The paint application was uneven. The old heater clicked loudly and erratically whenever it attempted to function. None of those details mattered in the slightest. The space was utterly mine. I worked grueling evenings at a call center located 2 blocks away. I coded relentlessly every night. Every single dollar earned went toward rent and hardware upgrades. Every hour not spent sleeping was devoted to building something. Though at that time I had no clear idea what the final product would become. The first major prototype barely functioned. The second version immediately overloaded the system. The third version finally worked long enough to instill a genuine belief that I might actually be capable of achieving the life I envisioned. The fourth iteration evolved into the highly successful platform upon which I built my entire company. No part of that process was glamorous. It was intense repetition, crushing exhaustion, and long nights where I physically fought sleep at my keyboard. It was the first period in my life, however, where I felt absolute ownership of myself. Ava arrived during the later part of that chapter, not in the struggling beginning, not when everything was visibly falling apart. She appeared precisely when my working prototype began gaining real traction, and I desperately required an expert second opinion, someone who possessed a deep understanding of structural integrity and utterly refused to sugarcoat any feedback. She quickly became the person who constantly tested my limits without ever questioning my potential. That crucial difference defined our partnership. All these fragmented pieces of memory remained with me on the balcony until approaching footsteps broke the silence. Ava stepped alongside me. "Your family is causing a visible split in the room," she reported. "Some guests are attempting conversation with them. Most, however, are simply watching you intently. I am not re-entering that room just yet. You have no need to do so." We stood together without speaking for a moment. The entire city stretched far below us, yet we were not actively looking at it. I remained focused on the memories because they grounded me more deeply than any panoramic view ever could. "Do you still recall the exact night you moved out?" Ava asked quietly. "I remember every single second vividly. You did not break under the pressure." "I came dangerously close," I admitted softly, "but you did not break." Her voice conveyed only facts, completely devoid of either judgment or praise. I drew a long, deep breath and finally pushed away from the railing. "I need to complete this final segment inside the ballroom." Ava nodded immediately and followed me toward the massive ballroom doors. Upon our re-entry, the entire atmosphere had shifted again. Conversations instantly stalled as I walked by, not merely due to simple curiosity now, but because people were urgently recalculating my precise position in their social and financial world. My family stood near the distant table. My mother looked visibly smaller than I remembered. My father stood upright, but his characteristic confidence had subtly slipped away. Mason watched me like someone observing an inevitable storm approach, utterly unsure whether running or bracing himself was the better option. I stopped a few feet short of their cluster. My mother spoke first. "We saw your startling announcement. We truly did not know anything about your business." "That is exactly the point of it," I stated. She raised one hand slightly as if reaching for a familiar argument she could no longer form. My father instantly attempted to intervene. "You should have come back to us much earlier. We certainly could have offered support." "When exactly would that have been?" I challenged myself. "Before I went to Northwestern, before you deliberately removed my name from every official document, before you explicitly told me Mason would manage the family's future because I was simply not suited for it." None of them offered a reply. I turned to my brother. "You told me directly that I would fail before I had even truly begun." He immediately lowered his gaze. "I completely failed to understand what you were actively doing." "You failed to try understanding." He swallowed hard. "Perhaps that is true." No trace of rage remained within me, only complete clarity. "You actively pushed me out," I explained, "and I built a completely independent life without any of you in it. That was never spiteful. That was mere survival." My mother's voice cracked audibly. "We honestly made terrible mistakes." "You consistently made active choices," I corrected her gently. The difference instantly impacted all three of them. I saw the meaning of land hitting them one after the other. "I am requesting nothing from any of you," I concluded. "No forgiveness is needed, no reconciliation is expected, no understanding is required. You remain free to keep your established narrative about why I left. I, however, will retain the absolute truth." My father exhaled slowly, accepting the finality. "In that case, what exactly do you want from us now?" "Nothing whatsoever." A single devastating word. Silence followed. It was not tense or overtly dramatic. It was simply the honest new silence between people who no longer wielded power over one another's lives. I stepped back. Ava instantly joined me without a spoken word. We walked toward the ballroom's opposite end, passing clusters of guests who smoothly parted without any verbal request. I felt perfectly steady, neither triumphant nor overwhelmed. just steady. What shattered that night years ago had never been repaired. It had simply been replaced. And for the very first time, standing confidently in a room that once made me feel completely invisible, I knew precisely how vast the distance was from the terrified girl who had abandoned her home in the relentless rain. I continued moving through the ballroom's periphery, deliberately choosing a route no one expected me to take. There were no grand attention-seeking entrances, no dramatic turns or pauses. I merely walked. The massive room hummed vibrantly with music and conversation, but the small pockets of quiet that consistently trailed my passage carried an entirely different weight, a weight I no longer felt compelled to acknowledge. People looked up, then instantly looked away, as if staring too long might somehow break the delicate line between simple curiosity and genuine fear. I offered absolutely nothing for them to interpret. No glances were returned, no subtle nods offered, no explanations provided. Silence had evolved into the sole language that still felt completely clean and honest. I paused near a vacant high-top table discreetly tucked beneath the balcony overhang. A dimmer, gentler light collected there, softly blurring the edges of everything. The spot allowed me a moment to simply breathe. Not a moment to recover, but merely a moment to exist without anyone reaching for me, questioning my motives, or demanding an explanation. Across the room, my entire family watched my stillness. They made no move to approach me. They were not ready to do so. Or perhaps they finally realized that any renewed aggressive push would only succeed in widening the immense distance. Their hesitation, in any case, no longer affected me. For this one night, it felt utterly earned. My father whispered something low to my mother. She immediately glanced in my direction, her face displaying a kind of profound uncertainty I had never once seen from her. Her hands were clasped so tightly together that her knuckles appeared blanched. Mason stood slightly separate from them, looking unsure of his own footing now that the predictable subservient version of me no longer existed. Their collective uncertainty rolled slowly toward me like a rising tide. I offered no reaction. Stillness remained my deliberate choice for the night. They had absolutely no idea how to respond to it. A passing server offered a glass of champagne. I took it not because I actually wanted the drink, but because the physical motion grounded me. I watched the tiny bubbles rise in quiet, persistent spirals, climbing without hesitation. A sudden thought struck me. Some things simply rise because it is their nature to do so. Voices abruptly swelled on the far side of the ballroom. Someone laughed excessively loudly. Someone else whispered my name behind a quickly lowered fan. It all quickly faded into mere background noise, unimportant and incredibly far away. For the first time all night, I sensed the faint outline of genuine peace settling quietly around me. I did not have to perform for them. I did not have to defend my life choices. I did not have to prove a single solitary thing. My silence effortlessly accomplished the work for me. Eventually, my family inched slightly closer. Not close enough to physically invade my carefully chosen space, but close enough to make their presence keenly known. The three of them stopped several feet away, forming a cautious half-circle that left a palpable pocket of air separating us. They looked visibly expectant, as if hoping I would instinctively rush to fill that silence to rescue them from their own intense discomfort. I did not move. My mother whispered, "Grace," barely more than an audible breath. It was not yet a genuine plea. It was simply a test, a hesitant, cautious step toward a door she strongly suspected she was no longer permitted to open. I did not provide an answer, not out of simple cruelty, but purely because I no longer owed every single one of my feelings a spoken explanation. My father cleared his throat, the sound strained and completely unfamiliar. He appeared visibly smaller now, or perhaps simply human in a way I had previously never been allowed to perceive. His gaze repeatedly drifted downward, then quickly flicked back up, filled with a kind of restless, internalized guilt. Mason shifted his weight repeatedly from one foot to the other. He looked fundamentally different from the careless sibling I remembered, less certain of himself, less carelessly arrogant. His typically sharp posture had softened into a visible manifestation of regret. Yet none of them spoke again, and I grasped a profound realization: they were waiting actively. They were not waiting for my inevitable anger to surface. They were not waiting for my instant, easy forgiveness. Instead, they were waiting desperately for permission to exist within whatever new version of my life would logically come next. The staggering power embedded within that quiet stillness was startlingly immense. One part of me mourned the many wasted years when I would have done literally anything to hear even a fraction of this current hesitation. Another part, the part that had successfully learned to survive and thrive without their aid, understood clearly that this silence was not actually empty. It was heavily filled with every harsh truth they had consistently ignored. I lifted the champagne glass slightly. I offered no specific toast, but simply acknowledged the moment for its profound magnitude. My family flinched instantly at the subtle gesture, as if it carried a secret meaning they were completely unable to decode. Let them wonder. I deliberately set the glass down without drinking any of the liquid. The stem clicked lightly against the tabletop, a small, sharp sound that somehow felt louder and more resonant than the entire orchestra. My family tensed simultaneously, watching me, as if every minute movement revealed a critical hidden message. It did not. Or perhaps it did. Silence possessed a unique ability to transform the smallest, most insignificant actions into profound statements. Across the large ballroom, Ava appeared near the staircase landing. She made no immediate attempt to approach me. She remained exactly where she was, observing the room's atmosphere, like someone accurately assessing the current weather before stepping outside. When she finally moved toward me, she did so with zero urgency, zero theatrics. She stood easily beside me, close enough that her presence perfectly steadied the space, yet far enough away that she offered no intrusion. She looked neither at my family nor at me. She simply existed beside me with the comfortable ease of someone who fully understood that not every single moment requires spoken words. It was the quiet, knowing connection established between us that ultimately told my family more than any prepared speech ever could. Ava eventually murmured, "Are you genuinely holding up?" A simple, gentle question. It was not about the social spectacle. It was not about the scandalous headlines. It was purely about me. I nodded once. "I'm perfectly fine." "I know that." Her tone conveyed absolute certainty, not mere reassurance. "You absolutely do not have to return to that room if you do not wish to." "I know," I confirmed. My family remained rigidly frozen in their uncertain cluster. My steadfast silence, Ava's absolute stillness beside me, the significant emotional distance I had intentionally chosen. None of this matched the volatile version of me they had meticulously constructed inside their minds. They had expected furious fire. They had expected public confrontation. They had expected the type of massive emotional eruption that always demands immediate cleanup. The complete absence of that chaos unsettled them far, far more intensely. A few nearby guests drifted closer, glancing nervously at us, then quickly looking away. They also sensed the profound shift, something unspoken holding the air taut, something heavier than simple anger, yet calmer than raging fury. My mother took a small, uncertain step forward, stopping instantly when she realized I was not going to meet her halfway. She opened her mouth to speak, then instantly closed it again, completely unsure of what to say. The hesitation itself felt like a comprehensive apology she did not know how to adequately form. My father's jaw worked silently, as if he desperately wished to speak, but could not locate a single sentence that would not instantly collapse under its own enormous weight. Mason finally whispered, "Grace, we are sincerely trying now." I offered no reaction. Not because I felt indifferent, but because I was no longer remotely responsible for cushioning the harsh truth for them. Trying was undoubtedly a start, but it was also extremely late, and silence remained the only honest, truthful answer I possessed. Ava glanced at me accurately, reading the precise moment as she always did. "Are you ready for us to leave?" I exhaled slowly, allowing the residual tension to settle into something perfectly clear and steady. I did not look at my family again. They desperately needed time to sit alone with their immense discomfort, and I possessed absolutely nothing left to give them this night. "Yes," I stated. We walked away, and the profound silence followed us. Not heavy, not hostile, just real. Behind us, I sensed my family watching, still completely unsure, still afraid, still clinging to hope. Yet they did not chase after me. I did not look back. Some deep rifts were never meant to be closed completely in a single night. Some truths urgently required quiet stillness to properly take shape, and some carefully chosen distances were absolutely necessary for everyone involved to finally perceive what had been undeniably present all along. As we stepped outside into the cool night air, a simple, unwavering realization solidified. The silence I maintained was not a weapon aimed at them. It was a clearly defined boundary, and that boundary belonged entirely to me. Leaving the dim corridor behind, I stepped back into the overwhelming glow of the ballroom lights. The atmosphere was again fundamentally changed, not noisier, not quieter, just distinctively different. People no longer huddled whispering in tense clusters as they had an hour earlier. Now they watched with a sort of careful, measured curiosity, as if desperately awaiting a cue they remained utterly unable to read. I did not stride aggressively, nor storm through the crowd, nor did I attempt to cut a path this time. I simply moved with an unhurried, measured pace. My posture remained entirely steady. My profound silence had subtly reshaped the entire surrounding air, and the crowd instinctively adjusted itself without my uttering a single word. Conversations immediately softened when I passed near. Polite smiles faltered. A few guests faintly bowed their heads, entirely unsure whether any acknowledgement was even appropriate or perhaps completely presumptuous. This quiet, intense attention felt unfamiliar, yet it was not unwelcome. It was undeniably earned. Near the room's center, I paused beside a towering arrangement of winter roses. Their pale petals curled tightly inward, as if actively guarding something precious. They reminded me vividly of the girl I had once been, emotionally folded tightly, desperately hiding softness beneath an instinctive protective defense. I reached out a hand, touched one single bloom lightly, and then let my hand drop back down. Small, meaningful gestures had become my chosen language for the night. A slight shift in the room's dynamic tugged immediately at my awareness. My family was approaching not all at once, but gradually, like cautious people edging slowly toward a painful truth they weren't remotely ready to fully face. They stopped several feet away, clearly hesitant, unsure if their presence was genuinely welcome or if this new, formidable version of me would even grant them a look. I did not look up. I simply waited for their move. Mason was the one who finally closed the distance, though he meticulously maintained a respectful, noticeable space between us. He did not approach with the fury he exhibited earlier, nor the sharp protective edges he typically wore like armor. His entire expression had softened into something far quieter, a blend of genuine confusion mixed with a visible reluctance he no longer knew how to effectively conceal. "Grace," he murmured, his voice barely louder than the soft background music. "I truly need to ask you something important." I lifted my eyes to meet his gaze, silently signaling that he should proceed. He swallowed hard. In that single moment, he looked significantly younger, not in age, but in sheer lack of understanding. "When did you fundamentally become someone we no longer even recognize?" The question itself landed gently, but the raw truth underlying it carried enormous, undeniable weight. It was not an accusation, not a suspicion, not outright hostility. It was a profound admission they realized they had been watching a complete stranger confidently walk through their world, and they simply could not reconcile that powerful stranger with the timid girl they had once so easily dismissed. I did not answer immediately. The profound silence stretched out, and instead of defensively bracing against it, they actually allowed it to simply exist. That willingness alone marked a fundamental shift I had never even imagined witnessing. My mother approached next, her hands clasped tightly together, her expression visibly unsteady. She studied me with the careful, measured attention of someone deeply afraid of drawing the wrong conclusion. "How long?" she asked softly, her voice barely audible. "Have we been truly this far behind you?" My father remained a few deliberate steps back, intensely observing the exchange with a profound focus I had never once seen directed at me. His shoulders were rigidly set, as though holding a massive responsibility he was suddenly unsure he genuinely deserved. I exhaled very slowly. The truth I offered was not sharp or accusatory. It was not intended to be angry. It was simply real. "A very long time," I replied. They absorbed that direct statement without offering any argument. There were no immediate defenses raised, no outright disbelief shown, only profoundly quiet. My mother pressed her lips tightly together. Her breath trembled slightly. "We consistently assumed. We simply knew you completely." "You only knew the specific parts you actively wished to see," I responded. "The rest of my identity simply did not fit your predefined picture." Mason looked immediately down at the floor. "And we failed to ask the right questions." That was the absolute closest he had ever come to delivering a genuine apology without ever using the actual word. For a moment, none of us spoke a word. The orchestra smoothly shifted to a much softer melody, a warm, gentle sound that threaded through the room like a slow, collective exhale. I felt the faintest pull of genuine relief, the kind that surfaces when intense pressure eases significantly but does not vanish completely. My father finally stepped forward. His voice, when he used it, held absolutely no authority whatsoever, only honesty. "What exactly should we have genuinely seen, Grace? Not what did you hide, not what are you doing with your life, not who are you truly working for, but what should we have seen?" A profound question they had never, ever imagined needing to ask me. I held his gaze for a long moment. His face, always stern, always emotionally distant, now carried lines of consequence I hadn't properly noticed before. They were not merely lines of age. They were lines of undeniable consequence. "You should have seen the person I was consciously becoming," I told him, "not the person you actively feared I would perpetually remain." The profound silence that followed did not sting or hurt. It merely settled. Heavy, yes, but necessary. My mother's eyes visibly glistened. "We genuinely do not know how to begin understanding you now." "You are not required to do so immediately," I replied calmly. "Understanding requires considerable time and consistent effort, but asking these questions is undoubtedly a definitive start." Her breath caught sharply. She nodded slowly. It was not a gesture of defeat, more an acknowledgement of a complex, undeniable truth. Guests drifted around our small group, meticulously pretending not to look directly, though their intense curiosity pulsed aggressively at the room's edges. I did not mind their observation. There was no confrontation here, no spectacle intended, only the quiet, defining moment that leaves an indelible mark long after the entire night concludes. Mason spoke again, his voice notably steadier than before. "Grace, what do you realistically want from us now moving forward?" I allowed that complex question to settle fully. It was not a simple matter. It was not something I could easily shape into a neat request or a tidy, immediate boundary. What I ultimately wanted was space for my continued growth, space for their accountability to fully manifest, space for them to patiently sit with their intense discomfort without expecting me to constantly soothe it. "Right now," I said at last, "I simply want ample room to undeniably be the person I currently am." He nodded slowly, absorbing the request. My father did likewise. My mother quietly wiped a tear from her cheek, but made no attempt to conceal the motion. A surprising, profound sense of calm washed over me. It was not forgiveness. It was not an immediate closure. It was absolute clarity. We stood physically in the exact same room, yet emotionally we occupied entirely different spaces. Perhaps one day the distance separating us would organically shrink, or perhaps it simply would not. Either potential outcome felt perfectly honest. Ava appeared near the ballroom's perimeter. She offered no interruption. She made no signal for my attention. She simply waited with an immense quiet patience, giving me complete control over precisely how this moment would naturally conclude. I stepped back slightly, not an act of definitive leaving, but merely signaling that the emotional conversation had reached its natural resting point. My family immediately understood the signal. They did not reach for me. They did not plead further. They allowed me to choose the necessary distance. As I began walking toward Ava, Mason's voice rose one final time. It was not demanding. It was not desperate. "Grace, will you genuinely allow us a chance to try again?" I paused deliberately, turning just enough to make direct eye contact with all of them. "That depends entirely on what you truly mean by the word try." I offered no further elaboration. They did not push me for immediate clarity. Some answers I knew had to patiently unfold over time. I rejoined Ava. She instantly fell into my natural pace without exchanging a single word. The orchestra swelled again, filling the room with vibrant, weightless sound, as though the entire night were organically resetting itself. Behind me, my family stayed rooted exactly where they were, silent, profoundly uncertain, undeniably changed. Ahead of me lay a future that finally and completely felt like my own undeniable creation. And for the very first time in countless years, the internal question haunting me was no longer, what do they ultimately want from me? It had finally become, what do I authentically choose next? I chose to remain near the ballroom's outer edge, where the intense light softened and the vibrant music faded into something almost forgettable. That quiet zone provided ample space to breathe and, more importantly, space to intently watch the room without inviting new attention. Guests seemed unsure whether to approach me or actively maintain their distance. That hesitation spoke volumes more eloquently than any direct staring. My family remained clustered at a nearby table. They were not whispering now. They were not actively strategizing their next move. They were waiting, not expecting a fresh chance to scold me, nor seeking a moment to fight back, but waiting for something completely unpredictable. I sensed their collective uncertainty tightening across the room, like a tangible, invisible, static charge. The expected humiliation arrived quietly. A woman I vaguely remembered from my childhood, one of my mother's long-standing friends, walked directly toward me. Her posture carried the distinct inherent confidence people possess when they believe they occupy the safe, elevated side of a specific social hierarchy. "Grace, my dear," she began, smiling broadly, in a way that distinctly lacked any genuine warmth. "I had no idea you were finally back in town. What a delightful surprise after everything." I instantly knew precisely where this conversation was headed. Before I could reply, she smoothly continued, "Your mother informed us you were merely finding your path. It must be quite challenging to return home and observe how much the world has successfully moved on without you." Her words landed with deliberate precision. They were calculated. They were public enough for any nearby guests to easily overhear. This was not a direct attack. It was a casual dismissal, carefully dressed in polite, patronizing tones, specifically designed to remind me of the lower social position she believed I still occupied. Years prior, such an exchange would have utterly crushed me. Tonight, it merely served to perfectly clarify the vast distance between the life I had definitively left behind and the formidable one I had single-handedly built. I offered no immediate answer. Silence proved far more effective than any spoken defense could ever be. The woman shifted uncomfortably, clearly thrown off by my refusal to play the expected role. The extended pause drew curious glances from others. She blinked rapidly, attempting a fresh angle. "You must feel terribly out of place here, dear. These large events can be truly overwhelming if you aren't accustomed to them." There it was, the precise humiliation she fully expected to land. A subtle, gentle push meant to instantly send me scurrying back into the shadows. I finally spoke. "I am standing exactly where I intended to be tonight." My voice was neither raised nor tinged with anger, simply the pure truth. Her practiced expression faltered instantly, as though she had suddenly walked straight into her own reflection and failed to recognize the distorted image. Before she could recover her composure, Mason appeared unexpectedly at her side. For a brief moment, I genuinely thought he intended to step in to defend me. Instead, he looked directly at the woman and stated quietly, "Perhaps you should allow her some necessary space." His intervention completely surprised both of us equally. The woman quickly excused herself with a stiff, unnatural smile and instantly retreated, leaving behind a profound silence that Mason seemed thoroughly unprepared to fill. He looked at me with open uncertainty. "They truly do not know how to speak to you now." I kept my gaze absolutely steady. "They never did." He offered no argument. That level of honesty alone felt new. Across the ballroom, I heard someone laugh sharply, a loud cutting sound, carrying just enough edge to signal outright mockery. A small group near the staircase quickly glanced at me, then at my mother, then back again. I instantly recognized the tone, the kind of judging laughter intended to evaluate exactly who still possessed social relevance and who did not. My mother noticed it too. I watched her stiffen instantly, saw her quickly exchange a panicked, telling look with my father. The humiliation was no longer aimed solely at me. It was swiftly beginning to shift directly toward them. People were now openly trying to decide whether standing near my family tonight would negatively impact their own reputations in the long term. That was the crucial part they had consistently failed to grasp. Control over a narrative only exists when the people surrounding you actively agree to perpetuating it. I permitted the moment to unfold naturally, offering no interference. Not out of cruelty, but because managing the external perception was no longer my assigned task. My father eventually crossed the room to join us. His steps were not confident. They were cautious, measured in a manner I had never before witnessed from him. He stopped a few feet from me, as if approaching any closer might immediately shatter the delicate balance of the night. "Grace," he murmured, his voice held low, "we truly must talk privately." "We are already conversing." His jaw tightened instantly, but not with anger, more with visible restraint. "This is not the appropriate setting." "It is the setting you personally chose tonight," I countered. He absorbed the weight of that statement without flinching. For once, he did not deflect the responsibility. A beat passed slowly. My mother joined him. She was not crying now, for which I was grateful. She looked profoundly tired, in a way I had never previously seen, like someone suddenly and acutely aware of the enormous distance between the ideal person she believed she was and the harsh reality of how the room currently perceived her. "I honestly did not think they would treat you so poorly," she murmured quickly, glancing around the vast room. "They merely learned the behavior from your example," I said softly. She shut her eyes briefly. Not denial, not outrage, just genuine impact. Someone nearby aggressively tried to listen in feigning intense interest in a tabletop centerpiece. My father's shoulders tensed up, but I did not move or lower my voice. Their discomfort was absolutely no longer my responsibility to manage. "You are handling this much better than we possibly expected," he conceded at last. "I completely stopped worrying about being handled years ago." Silence settled once more. It was neither sharp nor actively hostile, just profoundly honest. My mother studied me with a complex expression I could not fully decipher. It wasn't a pity. It wasn't fear. It was something far closer to recognition, late undeniably but genuine. "We truly did not want tonight to end this way," she whispered. "You wanted absolute control," I replied. "You did not genuinely want conversation." She offered no argument. Her silent, profound agreement lived palpably in the quiet space between us. Ava stepped smoothly into my line of sight from the crowd. She made no attempt to pull me away or intervene in the conversation. She simply waited steady, immensely patient, deeply grounding. Seeing her there instantly reminded me that the girl who once stood completely alone in rooms exactly like this was irreversibly gone. I was no longer isolated. The foundation beneath me no longer trembled. My father cleared his throat once more. "Grace, what is it you actually want from us?" I did not require time to think over the answer. "Nothing whatsoever," I stated simply. "Tonight was never about any of you." They absorbed that truth slowly, each processing it in their own unique way. Shock was absent from their faces. Something far heavier replaced it: responsibility. Humiliation had been their preferred tool for years. Tonight, the heavy weight of that tool finally settled squarely upon them instead of me. My mother gently touched the edge of the table beside her, seeking a small physical grounding. "You are not leaving us completely again, are you?" "I have not definitively decided that," I replied. The stark honesty of the statement made her inhale sharply. I stepped back slightly, not dramatically, just enough to firmly reclaim my personal space. My family did not follow. They knew better now. Ava joined me instantly as the orchestra shifted back into a calmer, more reflective rhythm. Her stable presence actively steadied the air immediately surrounding me. "Are you ready to depart now?" she asked. "Not quite yet," I said. "I want them to witness me stay completely unfazed." We stood together, steady and unmoving, while the ballroom continued its movements around us. No one else dared to attempt humiliating me again. Not out of fear primarily, but because the critical moment had irrevocably passed and I had successfully failed to break. What they genuinely thought would absolutely shatter me only marked the crucial point where I stopped needing anything at all from them. Some ultimate victories are not loud and proclaimed. Some do not resemble a massive dramatic triumph. Some are simply quiet moments when the ground you stand upon finally and completely stops trembling. And this was entirely mine. A subtle shift in the ballroom's rhythm alerted me before I fully comprehended the reason. Conversation instantly thinned. The crowd's attention subtly tilted toward the entrance. It was the specific kind of profound silence people fall into when something truly unexpected crosses their line of sight. I turned just enough to observe him step inside the room. No fanfare accompanied his entrance. No dramatics were necessary, just quiet, inherent certainty. Harold Lynn never required a formal introduction. His sheer presence executed the work for him, calm, deliberately understated, profoundly influential. He was the distinct type of man people immediately recognized without needing to understand the exact reason why. He scanned the vast room once before his gaze immediately stopped on me. Nothing in his expression changed, yet the undeniable recognition between us hit me like a clean, sharp strike. My family instantly stiffened. They did not know his specific name, but they instantly recognized his supreme status. The kind of status that cannot be faked, borrowed, or simply bought through mere proximity. Harold carried the visible calm of someone who habitually negotiated stakes far greater than any family pride. The entire room adjusted instinctively to accommodate him. He approached me without any rush. Other guests stepped aside, not because he overtly demanded it, but because he triggered a fundamental crowd instinct. My mother's hand gripped the table edge tightly. My father straightened defensively, as if physically bracing for an impending impact. Mason looked quickly from Harold to me and back again, desperately trying to fit us into a confusing narrative he simply did not possess. Harold stopped right at my side, close enough to indicate clear intention, yet far enough to prevent the moment from becoming overly theatrical. "Grace," he stated. "Not Ms. Dalton. Not anything formal. Just my name delivered simply and directly. I rather wondered if I might find you here tonight." His tone was genuinely warm, instantly familiar, the way people converse with long-term trusted colleagues, not with protégés. They seek to simply parade. I nodded briefly. "I certainly didn't expect to see you here this evening." "I know," he replied, "but we urgently need to finalize the remaining board signatures by early tomorrow morning, and I believed it best to discuss the details with you directly." The spoken words were soft and completely ordinary, yet devastating in their implications. Not because of their surface meaning, but because of the crucial truth they instantly revealed. My father's face changed first. Not shocked this time. Calculation. Recognition. He was frantically attempting to understand why a man of Harold's stature would speak to me with the easy familiarity of a profound, long-standing partnership. My mother's visible confusion instantly deepened into something closer to absolute disbelief. Mason's mouth opened slightly in surprise. "You actually know him?" Harold turned his head slightly, just enough to fully acknowledge my brother's presence. "She and I have actively worked together for several years now." He offered no further elaboration. He had absolutely no need to do so. My family stared blankly at me, no longer angry, no longer defensive, simply and utterly unprepared for this truth. Harold continued calmly, addressing me directly. The San Mateo acquisition deal will be publicly announced by Monday. Are you still completely comfortable with the valuation figure we discussed earlier? Another significant blow landed, not loud or dramatic, just an undeniable fact. The specific kind of fact that fundamentally rewrites people's assumptions in mere seconds. I answered him as evenly as he had asked the question. Yes, keep all plans exactly as they were. Good. His gaze softened slightly. And if you have a moment to step out, I brought everything you specifically requested. He smoothly lifted a small, unremarkable leather portfolio. It looked mundane, yet my father instantly recognized what it undoubtedly contained documents of immense consequence. He also instantly recognized the overwhelming implication Harold Lynn simply did not personally carry sensitive paperwork for people who were utterly irrelevant. I will be there in just a moment, I confirmed. Harold nodded once, then immediately stepped away to give me necessary space. He did not linger, he did not hover. He made no attempt to prolong the moment or make it about himself. He walked toward one of the hotel's private conference rooms, as if it were a routine he had completed hundreds of times before. My family's eyes tracked his movement until he disappeared completely behind the closed door. Then they all looked back at me. Not with the open hostility from earlier, not with the brittle confidence they had once possessed. Something far quieter replaced those emotions, uncertainty instantly mixed with a dawning, terrifying comprehension. My father spoke first. Exactly how long have you known this man? Long enough to establish trust, I replied directly. And what precisely is your working relationship with him? His voice did not bark the question. It genuinely creaked under its own massive weight. Work, I said. Real serious work. Mason stepped closer. Grace. He is one of the most profoundly influential figures in the entire West Coast tech market. I am completely aware of his reputation. He blinked slowly at the absolute neutrality in my voice. My mother swallowed hard. Is he the specific reason you... She gestured vaguely toward the room, toward the intense chaos of the night, toward the successful life she simply could not logically imagine. No, I corrected her. I built this life entirely myself. Harold merely recognized the potential before any of you ever did. That truth landed with force. It was not cruel. It was simply the truth. Their resultant silence was no longer defensively rooted. It was the silence of people who suddenly realized a crucial door had been wide open for years, yet they had never once bothered to step through it. My father looked back at the conference room door, then fixed his eyes on me. You are actively involved in acquisitions with a person like him. Among other significant responsibilities, I confirmed. He opened his mouth, then immediately closed it, unable to form a coherent response. The very edges of his long-held confidence visibly faltered in a way I had never previously experienced. For countless years, they had persistently treated me like a predictable child orbiting their elevated world. Tonight, they were forced to confront the harsh truth. They were the ones now desperately orbiting mine. I offered them no speech. I gave no warnings. I issued no declarations. The gravity of the moment required absolutely none of it. Harold's presence had been the final decisive blow. The truth spoke for itself far more loudly. I turned slightly. I have documents that require my signature. They remained completely rooted where they were. Nobody reached out to touch me. The dismissive comments they had relied upon for years never surfaced. They simply watched as I walked toward the door Harold had disappeared through, toward a successful world they had never believed I could ever enter, let alone actively help shape. The silence that followed my departure was not hostile. It was an absolute realization. And for the very first time all night, that reality felt entirely sufficient. The ballroom environment had fundamentally shifted again following Harold Lynn's appearance. The music continued, but the evening's tone felt irrevocably fractured. Small, tense conversations had quickly sharpened into intense speculation. Glances now carried an immense new weight. Every single whisper seemed to circle back inevitably to my name. I moved quietly through the room's far edge where the spotlight never reached, listening to the intense hum of gossip without allowing it to emotionally touch me. The truth had landed like a massive stone dropped into a perfectly still lake. The resulting ripples were widening rapidly, severely rearranging established alliances and long-held assumptions. I felt no fleeting sense of triumph, only pure clarity, a quiet, exacting clarity of purpose. I had barely reached the remote corridor when a familiar, strained voice spoke my name. It was not loud. It was just loud enough to intentionally trap me in place. I turned instantly. My father stood a few feet away, his expression not angry this time, not bewildered. It was purely calculating. His face carried the intense tension of a man standing on severely unstable ground, frantically attempting to decide whether to desperately jump for safety or simply freeze completely. "Grace," he stated, "we urgently need to speak with you." The phrasing was revealing. Nor can we, but we need to. The distinct tone of a powerful man who had just horrifyingly discovered that the thing he had carelessly dismissed had grown sharp, decisive teeth. I did not move closer to him. "Regarding what specific subject?" He quickly glanced toward the ballroom's entrance, ensuring no one was near enough to overhear their private conversation, not out of concern for my security, but entirely for his own image. "Your announcement fundamentally changes everything for us." Of course it did. They had devoted years to ensuring I occupied no meaningful space within their carefully constructed world. Now I had deliberately stepped into it, possessing far greater power than any of them had ever achieved. My mother immediately appeared beside him. Her smile was brittle and transparently practiced the exact expression she utilized when desperately attempting to maintain strained peace at a dinner table filled with people she despised. "This recent development has certainly caught us completely off guard," she articulated carefully. "But with focused coordination, we can easily present a perfectly united front, the three of us, for the essential sake of the family's public image." There it was, not genuine remorse, not genuine understanding, just blatant self-preservation meticulously dressed up as urgent diplomacy. I almost offered a sharp laugh. "You genuinely believe I care about the Dalton family image?" My mother blinked slowly as if the question itself were fundamentally inappropriate. "Public perception will inevitably shape absolutely everything that follows. Your new company, our long-established name, it is all intimately intertwined now." "No," I corrected her quietly. "It absolutely is not intertwined anymore." My father took a distinct step forward. "Grace, you must be reasonable now. You may have single-handedly built something undeniably impressive, but impulsive announcements made without consultation. Impulsive. A decade of relentless, grueling work, and they still genuinely assumed my actions were completely lacking in forethought." He continued, ignoring my cold stare. "Could easily invite severe scrutiny. Neither side is adequately prepared for. Investors, current partners, the persistent press, they will all begin actively digging for information. It would clearly be far better for all parties involved if you permitted us to guide this unforeseen transition." Guide, control, contain. A sudden chill permeated me, not fear, but immediate recognition. They had not followed me out of genuine concern for my well-being. They had followed the overwhelming scent of a substantial, uncontrollable risk. "What transition are you proposing?" I asked. "To fully reintegrate you," my mother stated gently. "To meticulously position you as a key functional part of the established Dalton family narrative. A compelling story the public can easily embrace." I allowed the profound silence to remain lasting, just long enough for both of them to visibly shift their weight uncomfortably. "You are not requesting reconciliation," I observed clinically. "You are requesting alignment. You are asking for a crucial branding opportunity." My father instantly stiffened. "This is simply sound business, Grace." "No," I countered. "This is sheer unadulterated panic." A distinct flicker crossed his face. Initial annoyance quickly superseded by something far colder and more familiar. It was the precise expression he had worn years ago when bluntly instructing me to significantly lower my expectations to keep my personal ambitions tidy and permanently manageable. "You fail to grasp the negative consequences of attempting to manage this alone," he warned. "I have managed absolutely everything alone since the very beginning." Neither of them offered an argument to that statement, not because they actually agreed with the truth, but because they knew it was undeniably accurate. My brother immediately appeared, then approaching with extreme caution, like someone warily entering a room already heavily filled with thick smoke. He appeared far less angry than before, but not noticeably softer, simply utterly uncertain which side of the unfolding aftermath he urgently wished to stand on. "Grace," he said, scratching the back of his neck nervously, "everything has occurred so quickly. We just genuinely need to know what you exactly want from us right now." What I wanted. The specific question they never asked me when it actually mattered most. They were clearly not here to mend the situation. They were here exclusively to assess the palpable threat level. "Mason," I inquired softly, "what specific things are you most deeply afraid of losing immediately?" He instantly hesitated. The pause stretched too long. His silence revealed far more truth than any possible answer. Good. The inescapable truth finally possessed undeniable shape. My father spoke again, quickly interrupting before Mason could adequately gather a response. "If you refuse to cooperate with our guidance, this situation will inevitably become profoundly unstable. The press will exert massive pressure for immediate statements. Investors will seriously question your leadership credibility. You may simply not possess the necessary capacity to manage the catastrophic fallout completely alone." "You still genuinely believe I am the liability here," I countered calmly. "Yet it is the three of you frantically scrambling to contain something you fundamentally failed to anticipate." My mother took a small step toward me, deliberately lowering her voice, as if mere softness could effectively disguise her underlying motive. "Grace, we are sincerely offering you much-needed support." "No," I said gently. "You are offering intrusive oversight and an invisible leash." The words struck them far harder than I had initially expected. They visibly jolted something deep within all three of them. For the first time, I clearly saw a profound crack form in my father's previously unwavering composure, a faint telling sign that the established balance had fully and completely shifted out of his absolute control. I permitted the silence to stretch out even further. I allowed them to feel, however briefly, the immense, debilitating weight I had faithfully carried for countless years. "You were entirely correct about one single thing," I said finally. "This event changes everything for all of us, but not remotely in the way you currently believe." My mother exhaled, shakily defeated. "Then what, Grace, do you ultimately want from us now?" "Nothing," I repeated firmly. A single, powerful, and utterly devastating word. My father's jaw immediately tightened. "You are being short-sighted and naive." "No," I countered directly. "You are." I deliberately stepped past them, but paused once, just long enough to absolutely ensure the message settled precisely where it was intended. "I owe you no strategic alignment," I reminded them. "Nor do I owe you protection. Nor do I owe you my silence." They offered no further answer. They were too preoccupied absorbing a terrifying truth they had never adequately prepared for. I could definitively walk away from them without losing anything of value. They conversely could not. When I finally departed the corridor, none of them immediately followed. None reached out a hand for me. None offered a final desperate angle, a last-ditch plea. For the very first time, they profoundly understood that the old tactics, the familiar emotional leverage, the predictable old narrative, none of it was applicable anymore. That terrifying realization frightened them far more intensely than the mere thought of losing me ever could have. I re-entered the ballroom's vibrant atmosphere. The lights felt softer now, the music slower, the entire ambience shifting like a tide adjusting to the intense pull of a new moon. People whispered undeniably, but their voices no longer pressed heavily upon me. They simply drifted harmlessly around me, irrelevant and inconsequential. Ava appeared immediately near the room's far edge, watching me with a quiet, knowing expression. She did not inquire about what had specifically transpired. She did not need to. She could instantly read the profound steadiness in my steps, the finality etched into my entire expression. "Well," she murmured softly as she reached my side. "They came here specifically to negotiate terms," I stated. "And what was your final response?" "They possess absolutely nothing I remotely desire." A small, genuine smile touched her lips briefly. "Good." We moved toward the hotel exit together, my pace completely unhurried. Hers matched mine with an ease that felt completely earned. The cold night outside waited for us open entirely unclaimed, utterly untouched by the raw desperation I had definitively left behind. When the massive doors closed firmly behind us, the last fragile thread connecting me to the old subservient version of my life snapped cleanly without any residual pain, without any unnecessary ceremony. They had desperately scrambled to urgently fix what was fundamentally beyond repair, and I had walked completely away before they even fully realized the damage was never ever mine to fix. The corridor immediately outside the ballroom felt unnaturally still, as though the intense noise behind me had been instantly severed with a clean, sharp blade. I continued walking until the frantic murmur of the Gala dissolved into a very distant hum, quickly replaced by the soft, controlled echo of my own heels and the slow, steady rhythm of my breath. For the very first time all evening, no one actively followed my movements. Victory always possesses a far sharper, more defining edge when it has successfully grown out of countless years of profound silence, years of constant dismissal, years of knowing fundamentally that no one would ever come running if I failed completely. Perhaps that was the specific reason the quiet stillness now felt heavier than I had initially expected. It was not painful. It was simply unfamiliar and overwhelming. I reached the remote far balcony and deliberately stepped out into the biting cold. The magnificent city immediately stretched far below me, steady, brightly lit, and utterly indifferent to my presence. Every single light carried the identical profound message the world would continue its movement, whether I was instantly celebrated or completely forgotten. I permitted that deep truth to fully settle within me. People commonly imagine triumph as a cacophony of noise, loud cheers, thunderous applause, overwhelming external attention. Yet the real defining version arrived quietly, wrapped in a profound stillness, cloaked in a specific kind of powerful solitude that no one ever warns you about. I had successfully built an empire, effortlessly crossed every boundary they swore I would never reach, yet the moment immediately following the big reveal held absolutely no fireworks. Only slow, deliberate breath, only quiet, expansive space. For years I had meticulously pictured this exact night's events. I believed wholeheartedly that I would feel utterly vindicated. I assumed the sheer satisfaction would be more than sufficient to successfully drown out every single agonizing memory of being mercilessly pushed aside. But standing here, the only emotion I genuinely felt was significant distance. Not simply distance from them, but immense distance from the insecure girl who once desperately craved their cheap approval, who used to instantly shrink under the predictable weight of their cruel words. She was completely gone, and I harbored absolutely no desire to ever retrieve her. The immense power I wielded was completely real. The success I achieved was absolutely undeniable. Yet none of that fully settled the unexpected quiet now resting in my chest. I leaned against the railing, inhaling the cold air slowly. Perhaps this was the genuine, difficult look of true adulthood, standing completely alone immediately after a significant victory, and starkly realizing that the wind did not magically patch the old deep wounds. It simply and finally confirmed that I had definitively survived without requiring their assistance. The enormous empty space where their validation used to reside no longer actively frightened me. It felt more like a room finally cleared out completely after decades of accumulated clutter. Bare, sharp, clean. A quiet part of me fully knew that the external world would not fundamentally shift around my staggering revelation in the way my family desperately feared it might. The immense city would awaken tomorrow morning utterly unchanged. Business deals would continue to close. Projects would move forward relentlessly. My successful company would operate exactly as it always had done. The only genuinely significant shift had occurred entirely and profoundly inside me. I no longer carried the immense emotional weight of constantly trying to be genuinely understood by them. I no longer patiently waited for them to rewrite the painful past events. I no longer needed my enormous success to mean anything whatsoever to anyone other than my own self. A powerful gust of cold wind swept briskly across the balcony, successfully pulling me back into my body. I wrapped my expensive coat tightly around my shoulders and allowed the deep breath I had unconsciously been holding to leave my lungs in one long, steady stream. This quiet, this sudden sharp clarity was the true defining turning point of my journey. Not the spontaneous applause, not the incessant whispers, not even the sheer shock visible in their eyes, just me finally unburdened completely by the profound idea that winning absolutely required witnesses. My painful past had finally and definitively closed its heavy door. My unknown future waited somewhere far below in the vibrant glow of the sprawling city, and in the narrow, quiet space precisely between those two powerful forces, I discovered something I had not remotely expected to feel tonight. Not triumph, not revenge, not immense pride. Control. I pushed decisively off the railing, straightened my shoulders confidently, and walked back inside the warm room. The loud noise immediately returned, but it utterly failed to reach me anymore. It simply moved around me, never truly through me. Whatever unexpected challenges will arise after tonight, I will resolutely face them without the crippling shadow of who I used to painfully be. The quiet had definitively chosen its side, and it had chosen mine. I returned to the bustling ballroom for one single reason, only to decisively end the entire night on my own terms. The relentless noise had softly diminished into a polite, continuous murmur, the specific sound that fills any large room when every single guest is desperately pretending not to watch the central drama. Faces visibly shifted as I passed expressions of curiosity, subtle calculation, quiet awe. None of their judgments mattered. I walked deliberately toward the main central table, the specific one my family had proudly claimed for countless decades at every single gala they ever hosted. Their family legacy heavily sat inside that defined space like an old, immensely expensive, but rapidly fading perfume still clinging tenaciously to the fabric. My mother looked up immediately as I approached, a desperate flicker of hope rising instantly in her eyes before she could successfully hide it. My father quickly straightened his posture, obviously expecting a final conversation, a possible compromise, or just one last chance to negotiate. Mason remained utterly still, profoundly uncertain whether he should deferentially stand or simply stay seated. The three of them were visibly frozen between their immense collapsing pride and their raw, terrifying desperation. I offered no pause. I did not slow my pace. I said no words. Reaching the edge of the central table, I briefly set my hand on its surface, confidently steadying myself for one final, deeply significant act. My fingers gently brushed against the necklace resting immediately against my collarbone, a small silver circle visibly tarnished on its reverse side. It was the only tangible object from my entire childhood. I still possessed a piece I actively kept, not for any sentimental value, but for the constant stark reminder it offered. I had once patiently waited year after painful year for their elusive approval. I unclasped it smoothly. The delicate chain slipped instantly into my waiting palm like a quiet final exhale. I deliberately placed the small object gently upon the tablecloth beside their untouched wine glasses, a clean, distinct, final gesture. It was not a gift of reconciliation. It was not a final, desperate plea for understanding. It was a clear, unalterable boundary, a definitive marker, a closing line on a painful chapter. My father's breath caught audibly in his throat. My mother's lips parted slowly in stunned silence. Mason leaned forward slightly, as if the profound meaning might suddenly change if he stared intensely enough. None of them fully comprehended the specific symbolism, but they instantly grasped the overwhelming implication. I stepped back slowly. Their eyes remained fixed solely on me, but their voices stayed completely trapped, motionless in their throats. They had spent the entire traumatic night frantically reaching for explanations for viable angles for desperate negotiations. Now they were left with absolutely nothing left to offer. A server crossed the floor just then, effortlessly weaving through the remaining guests with practiced grace. She paused briefly at my side. "Ms. Dalton," she stated quietly, "your specifically requested car is waiting immediately outside." It was not the massive Rolls-Royce convoy that had effectively shaken them earlier. It was not intended to be a spectacle. I had personally requested Thomas arrange for a single car, unmarked, profoundly understated, and already comfortably warmed for the cold night. "Thank you very much," I replied simply. The server nodded once and stepped discreetly aside. I turned and walked definitively away from the table, away from the elaborate ballroom, away from the intense chaos, the relentless whispers, and all their desperate attempts at emotional recovery. No one followed my movement. The persistent music immediately dimmed behind me as I reached the massive entrance doors. Thomas waited near the door, holding it wide open for me. He asked no questions. He never did. He instantly understood the underlying rhythm of the moment, understood the critical timing, understood the profound difference between a visible victory and ultimate hard-won closure. As I stepped past him, I physically felt the immense accumulated weight of the entire room fall away from my shoulders. There was no internal tug of regret. There were no second thoughts, only cold, decisive air, clean, sharp, and final. Outside, the sprawling city looked sharper, more defined than it had felt an hour earlier. Lights aggressively cut through the freezing winter night, steady and profoundly clear. My breath rose rapidly in a thin, visible stream, carrying the last faint remnants of the exhausting evening with it. I slid into the car's interior. The door closed firmly behind me with a quiet, solid click, the unmistakable sound of a complex chapter locking itself permanently shut. Thomas pulled smoothly away from the curb. The Grand Hotel immediately shrank rapidly in the rear window until it completely disappeared behind a line of dense, dark trees. I did not look back. I had already made the only choice that truly mattered. The night unfolded widely ahead of us, city streets opening one by one, the entire cityscape stretching forward like a vast, unclaimed map of future choices. I sat entirely alone in the comfortable back seat, feeling not loneliness, but something far steadier, something undeniably earned. When the car finally merged onto the main thoroughfare, I deliberately let my palm rest flat against the cold window glass, feeling the insistent hum of forward motion beneath it. This was the independent life I had built. This was the autonomous future I had fundamentally shaped, and no one else could possibly claim it but me. As we crossed the long, dark bridge, the entire city skyline rose prominently into full view, a quiet, powerful reminder that absolutely everything I needed was already patiently waiting for me on the other side. And for the very first time in years, the thought of the vast unknown future did not unsettle me in the slightest. It felt completely like freedom. Before the car smoothly dipped into the next long stretch of empty road, I spoke softly into the quiet stillness. "Drive." The engine deepened its low hum. The waiting night opened wider, and I consciously permitted it to carry me forward relentlessly.